Hi everyone. In this short video, I'm going to be providing a second overview of the ACL lab. Now the reason I'm making this video is that I've seen a number of students struggling with OSPF, both in the exams and in the OSPF module. Now this lab requires you to work with OSPF, so this video has been created to give you a kind of a refresher of how to configure it. It's not going to be a one-to-one demonstration of how to work on this lab, but it should give you enough of an idea of how to configure OSPF so you can do it right. So anyway, you're required to build this topology in GNS. You'll be using the subnets provided here, and you'll be configuring IP addresses on the router interfaces and the PC interfaces. You do not need to configure IP addresses on the switches. That's important to keep in mind. You're not asked to do that. Now, after you finish all that IP addressing, you'll have a second part in this lab, which is where you'll configure OSPF. So if you look here, I've basically replicated the lab, or at least the topology, in GNS. Note that I'm using different subnets. It's important to keep in mind. But one thing to keep, or a few things I want to point out. A few things I want to point out. First, note here that the subnet for this the subnet in this LAN encompasses everything here, encompasses this router interface, and encompasses the switch and these PCs. Note that these devices are on the same subnet. However, you do not need to configure the switch. Please don't configure the switch. You're not configuring OSPF on the switch. You're not configuring IP addresses on either of the switches. They're just here. The switches are just here to be here. Or actually, they're both here to allow these PCs to be in the same subnet. So if we just configured or connected these directly to the router, they would have to be in different subnets because each router interface needs to be in a different subnet. So that's why the switch is here. However, that's the switch's only purpose. Don't configure anything on the switch, please. You don't need to do anything to it. So another thing to keep in mind is that when you're configuring OSPF, you don't need to select separate interfaces. You're working on separate interfaces, but when you're global configuration mode, we don't specify an interface. So let's go ahead and configure OSPF. So this is router 1's terminal. We're going to global configuration mode. So the first thing you do is type router OSPF 1. Next, you type a network command. This is going to represent the network that this router is going to advertise to this router. So this router will have the networks or subnets that this router needs to route to. So that's important to keep in mind when you're doing OSPF. You don't, for router 1, you don't type this subnet here. That's not the goal of OSPF. The goal of OSPF is that a router advertises the subnets it's directly connected to. So for example, one of these subnets is 172.16.0.0. Now note here, this is not an IP address of the interface. This is simply the subnet ID. This is the subnet ID that we're typing here. Next is the wildcard mask, 0.0.0.255. Area 1. That's all there is to configure an OSPF, an OSPF network. Do the other one. Network 192.168.10.0.0.0.3 area 1. Make sure you keep them all in the same area. Now this is rather optional, but if you want to, passive interface. Now it's important to know where this passive interface goes. The passive interface is for the network interface. You type in the name of the network interface that is not connected to a router. So that would be F0/0. If you make the serial connection passive, you're going to cause a lot of problems because that's going to prevent router 1 from sending its OSPF advertisements to router 2, and that will prevent your network from working. If you don't want to deal with passive interfaces, you don't have to, but in this case, it'd be F0/0. So that's all there is to configuring OSPF. We can do the other router. So router OSPF 1 network 172.16.1.0. 0.0.0.255, area 1. Network 192.168.10.0. Note that this is the same network as we typed in router 1. You want to type in all the networks that a router is connected to. So we do 0.0.0.3, area 1. 1. We can do the passive interface. Interface at 0/0. There. So note that after we configured OSPF on both routers, notice this message here. So this is an indication that both routers have recognized each other as OSPF neighbors, and that's a good sign. That means OSPF should be working. So we're going to end. So one command you can use to verify your OSPF configurations is show IP protocol. So what show IP protocol is used for is checking a number of things that you configured with OSPF. For example, you have your OSPF or routing ID, OSPF ID. This is from the router OSPF command. So we type router OSPF1, that's why we see the 1. You can see the networks you typed in. These are from your network commands. And then finally, you can figure out what your passive interface is. Furthermore, you show IP route. And this is, if you notice here, this route is from here. This is the one that router 2 is advertising. That's a good sign. So you're not going to see like 172.16.0.0/24 as an OSPF route, because this network appears as a connected route. This is a connected route. And what you want to see is this route from router 2 appearing on router 1. So that's basically all there is configuring OSPF. Make sure you use subnet IDs in your network commands. Make sure you only enter OSPF route or enter OSPF subnets that belong to the router they're connected to. In other words, we go back to the topology here. Router 1, you only want to type in the 192.168.10.0, so that's 30 network, and the 172.16.0.0/24 network. We do not want to, on router 1, type this network in, because it's not adjacent to this router. It's not connected to one of its interfaces. So again, that's all there really is to configuring OSPF. If you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you all and have a good day.